major part of American culture for decades has been college sports. These are very hardworking individuals who have to balance life of being a full-time student and a full-time athlete. The major challenge in college athletics is whether they should be paid. After all, the revenue generated is mostly based on performance of the athletes. It's pretty straightforward. The bigger, the faster, and the stronger are more likely to generate more money. With that being said, it is important to understand why college athletes are receiving scholarships instead of being paid, why the NCAA refuses to pay athletes, and why college athletes should be paid on top of their scholarships. Being a college athlete is like living a secluded life that only devoted and hardworking individuals experience. The biggest sacrifice is time. There's hardly any time not spent studying, practicing, or sleeping. According to Peter Jacobs, here's the insane amount of time student athletes spend on practice. Some athletes are spending more than 40 hours a week practicing, which leaves little time for their academic commitments. So, in this survey here, done by the NCAA, this shows the average time in hours per day that college athletes spend practicing. So for football, they spend an average of 6.4 hours per day practicing, with 52% of these athletes reporting spending 6+ hours a day. During in-season practices, the NCAA requires that all athletes can only practice 20 hours per week, however. This is 4 hours a day. With some practicing over 40, this rule has obviously been broken. It's quite apparent that many athletes are putting the same amount of time as a full-time job. The question is if a scholarship is enough. The NCAA rules and regulations is the only thing in the way of college athletes receiving a pension from the large profits that they generate through sports. The goal of NCAA scholarship is to preserve an academic environment where the #1 priority is education. But how is this possible when an athlete spends more time practicing than studying? According to Patrick Ruby, the author of The NCAA Says Paying Athletes Hurts Their Education, the NCAA believes that paid players' attention would veer more towards their sport and less towards their education. The NCAA also believes that paying athletes would make athletes less involved on campus, as they would tend to eat off campus and even live off campus. The argument against college athletes being paid can be summed up into 2 main categories: the likelihood of the sport holding the student back from getting a good education, and the unfairness to other organizations who generate a profit from their performances. Often when challenging the idea, people pull the education card. When surveying 100 college students on whether or not they should be paid, 58% say sports hold students back from schoolwork. They claim sports take up too much time and energy, leaving the grades to suffer. Paying the athletes would be an incentive for them to work harder and longer. While this does make sense, it's important to see how other students spend their time, whether it is to pay for schooling or food. Most students have a job. If students work on average 6 to 8 hours per day, 3 to 5 days a week, they are putting in the same amount of time athletes are. In addition, people also tend to defend other extracurriculars, such as band and show choir, who spend a great deal of time performing. But college sports generate much more money than any of these other organizations. When it comes down to why college athletes should be paid, there are 2 main reasons. Being a college athlete is like working a full-time job, in which there is no time for them to work an actual job. Also, these athletes generate large sums of money each year for their sports. Since many college athletes are putting in extensive hours into their sports, they have no time to work. Many would argue that athletes are already on scholarships, so why should they receive any additional pay? For many athletes, a scholarship does not cover all of their basic needs, such as extra food costs or suit and tux rentals for required banquets. According to Dennis Johnson, author of Point Counterpoint, Paying College Athletes, athletes will have to pay somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 to cover outside living costs throughout their college career. With many college athletes bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars each year, there is more than enough money for athletes to receive some type of commission. After analyzing the pros and cons of college athletes being paid, we can conclude that it would be beneficial for them to earn a salary on top of their scholarship. We researched and found why they receive scholarships and why the NCAA doesn't pay them, then compared their thinking with a survey of 100 of our college-age peers. While the scholarship does provide quite a bit of support, they are left to cover the cost of over $12,000. Because of the amount of money that their performance generates and the amount of time that practices and games take up, being paid just simply makes sense. So next time you guys go to a sporting event, think about the time and effort that goes into that performance. Not only should we support them, we should fight for them to be paid what they deserve.